Hello everyone and welcome to another video, and what is the 1000th video on the channel. Today I thought we'd do something a bit, well, sort of different. We've touched on the subject before, but 1000 is a very high number. 1000 of any currency, most currencies, is pretty high. 1000 miles an hour is pretty fast. 1000 miles is a long distance, but where 1000 isn't really that high is when it comes to speeds of computer parts. Now, back in the day, hitting 1 gigahertz was a big deal, but now a 1000 megahertz processor isn't going to get you very far, and if you have 1000 megahertz RAM, the same can be said. GPUs not so much, but in today's video what I thought we'd do would be to underclock my entire computer to 1000 megahertz or 1 gigahertz just to see how bad performance is. We've touched on this before with individual components, but this time everything has been reduced, and we're going to see what sort of frame rate we end up with when we do this. No reason to do it, of course. There's absolutely no point to any of this, but there we go. Let's get into it. I'll show you what I've done to absolutely cripple my system, and hopefully it'll be a pretty fun one. So let's take a look. So when it comes to the graphics card, first things first, I hit Control F in MSI Afterburner, and I set this custom voltage frequency curve here. You can actually press Control L to lock and unlock it, and if you hold Shift, click the last thing here and move it up and down, you can select how high you want the GPU speed to go. Now I set this to just under 1000 megahertz, 999, and then I pressed Control L to make sure it doesn't boost any higher than 1 gigahertz. 960 seems to be where it tops out at around there. This will mean that the core clock now says minus 1017 megahertz. Setting the CPU and memory speed is slightly less complex. It just involves going to the system memory multiplier and setting the speed to DDR4 1000. For the CPU, again, we go up to the performance CPU clock ratio, type in 10, which will limit us to 1 gigahertz. The lowest we can go, I think, is 8 or 800 megahertz, and I think we've experimented with that before, but of course we are using 1 gigahertz today. I almost forgot to say that we disabled Intel Turbo Boost as well, so that it doesn't boost above 1 gigahertz on any of the 6 cores. Okay, so first of all we have Crysis here, the 2007 original. I wasn't sure how this was going to go, but as you can see, very high settings. Post-processing is set to medium, which allows us to turn motion blur off completely. The game still holds up really well, but we're running at about 30 frames per second. The exact figures will be up on screen for you, of course. Let's just see if we can... Oh, it did not like that at all. Oh dear. Yeah, the CPU limited to 1 gigahertz here, currently running at 998 megahertz. The RAM is also limited to 1000 megahertz, and the GPU, of course, the 3060 Ti, which ordinarily would be powering through this 15-year-old title. Unfortunately, it can't really deliver more than 30 FPS here. On the bright side, it is using just 45 watts of power, pretty much at maximum, which is nice if you want to save some energy, but what's even better than that is the CPU is only using 5 watts of power with these settings. Can we get 60? Look at that, 80 frames per second. Very nice. That's obviously not a good way to play, and I dread to think how bad the frame rate will get in more demanding games. Alright, so Battlefield 1 here, this actually started off really promising. From the main menu, we were getting almost 200 frames per second. It's not actually as bad as I thought when we're actually playing here, but I don't think this is going to allow us to remain very competitive when the action starts to heat up. I think we're going to see some horrendous drops in frame rate. This level isn't exactly the most intensive on the system, a lot of wide open space, but we are still hitting at least 50 frames per second, and to be honest, that is far higher than I thought. I thought I'd play it safe and go with the low settings this time around, but let's go and see if we can find some action and see what happens. Oh, it didn't like that. Yeah, now we're starting to feel the consequences of what I've done. 30 frames per second in this sandstorm. Can't see a thing. The game is starting to feel pretty choppy, but let's go and find some enemy players. I've got a really bad feeling about this. I'm literally running into the into the storm blind here. So yeah, I can imagine that I'm going to get sniped any second now, but we'll just have to wait and see. Let's. Oh, come on. Can we get a kill? Oh, I'm using the totally wrong weapon for the. Yes, well, we've hit him at least. Where is he? I think it's. Yes, come on. Ah. Okay, so here we are in CSGO. This is a more CPU intensive game using about 7 watts of power here as opposed to Crysis, which was using roughly 5. Battlefield 1, however, did use about 9 watts, looking back at the footage. I don't know what is happening there. This is sort of acceptable. It's just that in those busy areas and when there's some enemies on screen, you're going to see some pretty horrific frame dips. This is a game that relies far more on CPU power, and running at 1 gigahertz isn't ideal for the PC, and it's not ideal in order to remain competitive. Not that I'm any good at CSGO anyway. If you're someone like me that can't play this at the best of times, then doing this to your system definitely isn't going to help. But of course this is just for fun, and I can in no way recommend this. You've probably seen the footage now. No, that was a big drop. You've probably seen the footage now. You've seen that I've been killed about 1 million times. Oh, God, come on. At least we got one. Hey, sort of playable, but those big dips when you fire your gun or get fired at means that it's pretty difficult to play competitively. Okay, so I have to say that the temperature as well of the components is doing pretty well. 37 degrees at the moment for the GPU, 28 degrees for the CPU. These lower clock speeds are doing the temperatures wonders. However, of course, despite this definitely is no way to play. Firing up Cyberpunk next, and well, over 50 frames per second to start with. As you can tell, I'm in a pretty empty area of the map. This is definitely what is helping towards our higher frame rate here, but I'm sure that as we drive towards the city or even just start moving, as you can see there, we do dip to about 30 frames per second. The GPU, despite being limited to 1000 megahertz, seems to top out at around 960, but I don't think you're going to see any performance difference anyway between 960 and 1000. The CPU pretty much pins itself to 998, and of course the RAM is also clocked at 1000 megahertz. Running in dual channel mode, of course, we have 16 gigs of the stuff, and I think I'll probably upgrade that to 32 gigs soon. It'll help with newer games maybe, and it'll definitely help with editing. Back on the subject of this video, and as you can see now, it's turned into a bit of a disaster. FSR2 would definitely help here. We can enable it, but I think it's the limitation elsewhere now in this busy area, like the CPU running at 90%, anywhere between 90 and 99 actually. Yeah, that's going to be a pretty big hindrance. I've got everything at its lowest, including crowd density, which is a pretty intensive CPU option. And as always, getting out of the car does improve things, but overall, I'm surprised we're getting at least 30, as I have been in all of the tests so far. The game is completely transformed at low. I mean, there's no one on the streets at all. This is what it looked like before it got that update on consoles. Still looks okay, still a pretty good looking game, but in terms of the Cyberpunk aesthetic here, it's not really in existence at these settings. Still, these are settings I definitely use if you had a lower end graphics card. I've been sitting here a while waiting for Spider-Man Remastered to load. I don't think it's going to happen. The CPU's pinned at 100%, and we've had this black screen for 5 minutes. So yeah, I'm not sure this is exactly playable on this one. The frame rate's good, but of course nothing's happening. Over 200 frames per second here. Can't enjoy the game like this though, so let's move on. Okay, so in Need for Speed Unbound here, this is a fairly new one to my benchmark collection. I've had to go with low once again to try and hit over 30 frames per second. That said, the game still looks okay. Not a big fan of those effects, maybe we can turn them off somehow, but performance is alright at 1 gigahertz across the board once again, over 30 FPS as we move away from the busier town areas. We do see that frame rate increase to 40. I mean, a lot of these games are performing quite similar at the moment. Both the CPU and GPU are being absolutely held back today. My driving is not the best here, but the performance honestly is fine. I think I could probably play at 30 FPS here. Haven't played much of Need for Speed Unbound so far, but it is nice to jump in every so often and just cruise around the open world. Let's go down here and see how this affects things. Dropping towards 30 now with all these trees. Hit this ramp, see what happens. Oh, I really messed that up. Almost missed that. Now, I'm sure you get the idea now, so we're going to end with GTA 5. I wanted to test this one because with lower core count processors, say single core or dual core CPUs without hyperthreading, you do get a few graphical glitches, and I wondered if that was going to be the case here with the lower clock speed, especially when we've got the other components capped as well, but I can't see anything that would tell me, apart from the on-screen statistics and the lower frame rate, that we are running with lower speeds. There were a few missing textures in Michael's house when the game first loaded. The same, of course, does happen when you have a weaker or older CPU, but since then I haven't actually experienced any graphical glitches, and this game is running fairly smoothly, albeit with a few little stutters here and there, but it's not as significant as I've seen in some of the other games tried out today. You can play games at 1 GHz. I think if the CPU and GPU you have is relatively powerful to begin with, like the i5 and 3060 Ti combo is, but it's definitely not worth it. It was just for a bit of fun. We needed something to do with the number 1000 for the 1000th upload, and because of that, I thought this was definitely worth, a go. But I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like on it down below. What is wrong with me? Leave a dislike if you didn't. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.